guys. So last time we spoke a little bit about site placement and what your structures can start to do based on your immediate context. Please remember that your form is generated by your context. Why? Because your context, be it macro, wherever it's located, by the beach, by the mountain, will start to determine it. And whether you're sitting next to a really tall building, or a church, or an industrial area, will start to inform what your building looks like, right down to even in plan. How buildings sit in relation to, if that's your site, right next door to you, whether there's canopies, columns, walkways, pedestrians walking by, cars zooming past. These all are factors. So your form, remember, is generated by all of these things, including climate, including technology and so on. But I wanted to talk about something slightly different today. Today I wanted to talk about form. Now, form is interesting. Remember, we spoke about form, function, technology, and context. These are ways you can analyze, and we want to talk a bit about form, specifically around steel. Now, I'm going to perhaps say that if you go back to Ching's principles of form, space, and order, if you remember what you've learned, spoke about how things are expressed, right? He spoke about organizations, how you can organize spaces. He also spoke about how you can arrange to access things like approach. And one of the other things he spoke about is form. So, for example, if you have 3 or 4 lines, it creates a plane. If you create a depression or something that raises off of the ground, you create something that protrudes, it means it's highlighted. If you cover something, it automatically forms a box. So if you look at some of these elements or some of these forms, the thing that I wanted to say is that not only is your site generate a particular form, if your site is boxy and squarish, or whether it's generated by people walking past, you have a long, thin form, or whether you have a form that needs to stretch itself. Or sometimes if you're in a canopy of trees and you want to actually sort of dodge the trees and make elements and rooms and spaces, it's all generated by that. But forms are identified by and formed by these analysis of your context. And for example, if I come to the conclusion that my site and my form needs to be very square or series of squares, same, for example, my concept, my idea ends up being that it needs to be a series of squares, or it can be a series of squares, courtyards that are cut out. Notice how it's about a processional thing. This is a box with a cutout. This can be 2 pieces with a thin line, and that could also form a courtyard, but this is more additive and this is subtractive. So these are all these principles that you've got to keep remembering from Ching. But say, for example, you got different forms, you got boxes, you got linear elements. Linear elements can also be organic elements, which is sometimes very hard to get with steel. You get circular elements. And these are, if your concept ends up being this form, what I want to talk about is what does this got to do with steel? Now, if we look at all the lectures, you have round tubes, you got I-beams, you got square tubes, and I'm trying to make the argument that you need to use these elements specifically in separate specific applications. Let's just clear all layers. So say for example, my project is very much about making a box on a street. And this box has got another box that intercepts it. And perhaps there's something that goes over it like that. Now this box, if you think about what elements you have, you're most likely going to end up going with a square tube. Why? Because your eye, when you look at frames, your eye picks up the form of that frame. So it's like an aesthetic, right? But I think the most aesthetic, that doesn't sound like, yeah. But also, you also got to think about the buildability of that. Buildability. So in other words, my worst nightmare is when someone puts an I-beam in a wall like that. I mean, what is that? Or they do this. What is that? Why? What do you do with that space? Do you take your knickknacks, chip packets, and you put it in there? Do you put it? What do you hide bubble gum in there? No, that's terrible. So, if you've got a very square thing, you have to decide that most likely you're going to end up having nothing needs to show. You want this cladding to completely be engulfed with the material. So you never really want to see it. So if I had to cut a section through there, you're most likely going to end up with either a square section. If you are going to, this is in section, and if you are going to do an eye, you're going to have to end up covering that eye section. Remember, everything needs a frame. How do you fix that is the question. How do you fix that into there? So it's what your eye sees and how you build it. But say, for example, I have also a box. Let's demystify this idea that boxes don't only have to be made out of this. This box is framed, and I can use an I-beam. But I'm going to use the I-beam like a photo frame because inside of that, I'm doing glass. So I wouldn't use a square frame because I wouldn't want to make it only solid. I want to actually give it that depth inside of that, like that reveal, so it kind of emphasizes that. Why else would I use an eye section? Vertically, I would use it to perhaps, if something was attached to something very lightly, So I'm creating that line, I'm creating a gap, and I'm creating this I-beam, but within that I-beam you have many more lines. So perhaps I want to emphasize separation. Okay, so that's I-beams. We spoke a little bit about squares. Why would you use tubes? Let's see. I would use tubes when you're trying to contrast a box that floats. You would never put a floating box's legs like that. You would put it on the inside so that it appears to be separate from the structure, or you can put it on the outside like this. And this is the nice thing about steel. So you could do stuff like this. So if I put another I-beam here or another beam here, I could do that. But why would I use tubes? Is if I wanted to maybe create a very solid, less distracting line and almost break off this element from the box so that I can accentuate the boxness of that. But why else would I use it? If I'm using round members, so for example, I've got a round structure, because tubes can bend easily, you could use round tubes. You could use round tubes for girders that can contrast against very square things, for argument's sake. So yeah, I think the other thing about form as well is you can create a box. Let's take a long box. And what you could do is, if you had a fully glazed section, what really is nice is if you can put a screen that deals with sun in front of it. Now the nice thing about this is you can actually extend this. So what's happening is, it's like I guess like a face mask. You can cheat a bit. You can make this taller than the building itself. And that way you can make it look bigger than what it efficiently needs to be. If this is a very lightweight steel thing, you can even hang something, put something over it. A steel sheet. And you can get very expressive columns that go all the way down, double volume if you want to do. You can also start to bend things, a structure. You can take a long element on the ground and you can tilt it. This is a company called Low Tech, if you follow them on Instagram. But of course, there's the rationality of structure still. So within the wall, you could perhaps color this differently. So in section, you would still have people get to that point, and then you could rationalize it such that that would be the next level, and you would do this to it. So you end up making this a particular structure, a material. Let's find another texture. Let's use slat wall for the slanted bit. And then we use plaster for the bottom. There you go. So in reality, what you're doing is you're really actually making a building that looks like this. And all you're doing is you're slanting this bit, and you're creating a line inside of the elevation, and doing that, and you're changing the texture from 1, 2, and 3. So it's a bit of manipulation. Okay, I think that's enough for now. Thank you very much.